A humiliating end to America's longest war, a US military plane heading out of Kabul as hundreds of Afghans try desperately to hitch a ride. The last of the American troops left 2 weeks later under the cover of darkness, just hours before the August 31st deadline imposed by President Joe Biden. They left behind a nation in chaos and doubts about whether their presence had achieved anything at all. 20 years earlier, the US had driven the Taliban out of power, supposedly for good.
Thanks to our military and our allies and the brave fighters of Afghanistan, the Taliban regime is coming to an end.
The Americans had gone into Afghanistan after the 9/11 attacks to clear out the continuing terrorist threat from Al-Qaeda. They stayed to nation build, but, say critics, without any coherent policy.
Successive U.S. governments really struggled to articulate a clear strategy. It was never clear to anyone, quite frankly, why U.S. forces were still in Afghanistan after achieving their initial objectives. And so without that clear and consistent strategy, I think that made it very difficult to pursue this mission.
But if the mission itself had failed, the withdrawal was a disaster. President Donald Trump had been talked out of an abrupt pullout of American forces the previous year. His successor Joe Biden gave just 4 months' notice and failed to consult the US's allies.
This was disastrous. And, it was more Trump-like than Trump. It came as a gut punch to the NATO leadership. And, our NATO allies felt betrayed because they said, well, we can't stay without this American support, but we weren't consulted on this.
Without the support of the US and its allies, the Afghan National Army crumbled. Thousands of troops surrendered or deserted. The US withdrawal from Afghanistan is viewed as the biggest failure of Joe Biden's presidency so far, not just by his opponents, but by many of his supporters as well. And the White House is braced for an avalanche of fresh criticism to mark the anniversary, and for questions about whether it's learned any lessons from the debacle. And after the US experience in Vietnam, Iraq, and now Afghanistan, the policy of maintaining a long-term US military presence in far-off lands seems unlikely to be repeated. John Brain, TRT World, Washington.